the Chief Planning and Innovation Officer here at CTA, and I'm joined by Kara Bader, the Vice President of Innovation and Strategy. Joining us on the call today is Jarrett Walker from Jarrett Walker Associates, and Mr. Walker is a leading transit expert, known both nationally and internationally for his work around transit and especially around service design and network design. So I'll have Jarrett introduce himself and his team, and then we'll start walking through the presentation.
Thanks very much, Molly. I'm Jarrett Walker. I do want to introduce Daniel Costantino, who is here with me. Daniel was our project manager and actually the author of most of our report, the person who wrote most of the words. And we look forward to presenting this to you.
All right, we can see it. Jarrett, can you go to the next slide for me?
Sure thing.
So I'm just going to do a little bit of setup, and then Jarrett and Daniel are going to do the meat of this. So the Bus Vision Project was really a chance for us to rethink our bus network. It was something that we did start back in 2020, and the goal really was to do a first of its kind comprehensive analysis of our bus network and ensure that we had a good understanding of how bus serves our community, conversations about commuting patterns, about population, and also other sort of emerging trends that we see that may be impacting our bus network, like ride hail, like micromobility. And so it really was an analysis on how do we think about the CTA bus network. Can you go to the next slide for me? And just a little bit more setup. So we had some key questions that we charged Jarrett and his team with for this framing report as they were analyzing the bus network. And the next phase of this framing report, and we'll talk about at the end, is really a community engagement focus. And so it really set us up, and this framing report has set us up for that conversation. And the questions we wanted to ensure that we were looking to analyze and ensure was covered in this framing report was: how well does CTA bus network serve people of Chicago? What goals and priorities should drive CTA's decision about where and how often the bus operates? And lastly, how could the bus network change and improve over the next 2 to 5 years? And what would it take possible improvements to really become real? So that's just a little bit of setup. I'm going to turn it over to Jarrett and team to walk through their analysis and the framing report.
Thank you very much, Molly, and thanks very much, everyone, for the opportunity to present this to you. Obviously, I think you probably all know that the bus is an absolutely vital part of Chicago's transit network. It is the thing that serves virtually all of Chicago and carries about 60% of CTA's total ridership. It's also highly affordable and ADA accessible. We've seen that since the pandemic also, in that bus ridership has come back faster than rail ridership, which is not surprising because the bus is useful for going everywhere at all times of day. And as we've all seen, there is less commuting into the loop now, but still a lot of people going everywhere for all kinds of purposes all the time. And that's really what the bus, working together with the rail system, achieves. Now, in the pandemic, we really saw how essential the bus service is, with a ridership recovery that continues to be stronger than rail. Compared to previous years, transit riders at the height of the pandemic were, of course, especially likely to have lower incomes, not have access to a car, and hold essential jobs that can't be done remotely. I wrote an article at the time in Bloomberg called "In a Pandemic, We Are All Transit Dependent." And the point I was making back then in April 2020 is that everyone who has the option of staying home and having everything delivered to them and feeling safe is only able to do that because huge numbers of people are getting to their jobs at the groceries, at the hospitals, everywhere else they're needed to keep society going. And yes, Black people were particularly likely to be in that group of people who were still riding. What you see in this image is every bus stop in the city colored according to how far ridership fell in April of 2020 versus April of 2019. So how far ridership fell at the depth of the pandemic. And the blue dots are places where ridership didn't fall as much. And the red dots are places where it fell most extremely. And as you can see, there's a real match with the socioeconomics of the city here, with the south side in particular and parts of the west side being the places that continue to generate a lot of transit ridership right through the pandemic, even as obviously ridership fell off a cliff in places like the Loop. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about how we try to define success when we're talking about transit. And there are many ways to do it. But one of the things that we find really interesting is to talk about access to opportunity, to talk about the question, if someone's in a particular place, how many opportunities, jobs or other opportunities could they get to in an amount of time they are likely to have in their day? Like maybe 45 minutes each way. This image shows us how many more jobs can I reach by transit in 45 minutes compared to the jobs that are within 2 miles. In other words, what we're doing here is saying, okay, a job within 2 miles you can probably walk to. Where is transit really contributing massively to access to opportunity? And as you can see, it's primarily in this sort of inner band that rank from about a 2-mile radius from the Loop out to about a 7 or 8 mile radius. But you see also that there are greater limitations to what transit is able to achieve in the far south, in the far west, and also in the far north. I'll talk about that in a minute. But transit multiplies the number of opportunities accessible for lower income people many times over. It's really, really powerful in doing that. Now, how does the bus system do this? It does this using a technique called a frequent grid. Obviously, Chicago is a grid. Everyone thinks in grids in Chicago, but there's a particular power that you have in being able to operate a frequent grid pattern of service. And I want to just make sure you understand how that power works. So if you have a network that consists of parallel north-south lines all running frequently, and parallel east-west lines all running frequently and evenly spaced, then you can pick absolutely any 2 points, just any 2 points at all, any point A, any point B. And the way you get there is the same, which is that you walk, you don't wait very long because the service is frequent. You ride, you get off, you make a connection. You don't wait very long because the service is frequent. You ride, you walk. And those are the directions from everywhere to everywhere. So while your rail system is providing this very powerful capacity into the Loop, your bus system is providing this everywhere to everywhere travel opportunity, at least to the extent that it's operating frequently. You don't have to pick favorites. You don't have to decide whose trip is more important than some other person's trip, the way we so often find ourselves having to do as planners. That's the beauty of it. But I have to emphasize, the high frequency is critical. It's not enough to have a grid pattern of lines on the maps. The buses have to be coming soon so that the transfer is fast. And that's what makes the whole travel time reasonable. That's what makes it work. Now, you have on the left, as shown on the left, a reasonably robust grid during the day on weekdays. If you look at the image on the left, we've colored in dark red the most extremely frequent lines, 12 minutes or less, and we've colored in pink the 13 to 15 minute lines. But 15 minutes is the threshold at which usefulness starts really falling off a cliff once you drop below that effort, because transfer times become too long. So as you can see, if you look closely, you've got a pretty complete 1 mile grid of services every 15 minutes. There are lots of places, and this is very sensible, where on the half-mile streets, there's a less frequent line, and that's okay because most people on the half-mile street can walk to the mile grid. So it's really just there for those who can. And finally, of course, the grid fades out a bit on the very edges. But now I want you to notice what happens in the evenings, which is the image on the right, weekdays at 9 p.m. The grid is almost gone. There are very few segments left that are really running frequently enough for the grid to function as a grid. And yet what's happening in the evenings? Low-income people are especially likely to be traveling. That is when most retail jobs close. It's when restaurant jobs are both starting and potentially ending. There's an enormous amount of travel that lower income people need to do in the evening, and the network isn't there for them. One of the things we've found over and over again, especially since the pandemic, is that turning up evening service will turn up midday ridership. because a lot of what transit is doing for lower income people is making it possible for them to not own a car, making that practical. But for that to be practical, transit has to be there whenever they need it. And if it isn't, we're forcing more of them to buy cars, which is bad for the city and also bad for them. The grid also doesn't function as well on weekends. So again, the same map on the left, but now on the right is the map at Sundays at noon. This is better than the evening map, but it's still quite a bit more limited. And the important point about weekends, again, is that people with lower incomes are more likely to be traveling then. If you work in retail, you almost certainly work on Saturday because that's the busiest day in retail. If you work in a service sector job of any kind, you probably do not have weekends off. So for your life to be possible, you have to be able to make these trips 7 days a week. We have found for years that increasing weekend service is a huge ridership boost across the week. When we did the redesign of the Houston network way back in 2015, we were able to bring weekend service all the way up to be the same as weekday service, but minus the rush hour, and got an absolute explosion of weekend ridership as a result. There's a great deal of suppressed demand there. Now, finally, a bit of history. Before 2010, your network looked like the map on the left. And then by 2019, it looked like the one on the right. So there was a large service cut in the spring of 2010, 16% of rail service and 10%, bus service 16%. This reduced access to opportunity by weakening the grid, and this service was never restored. So, I mean, there obviously have been lots of little changes, but the big magnitude cut was never reversed. This happens sometimes in transit, that a recessionary disaster comes along and there has to be a cut, and then somehow when the economy comes back, it's never entirely restored. So I want you to be aware of that history, that the network used to be much more useful than it is now. That's related to the decline of bus ridership over the 2010s, although there were a lot of other factors such as the rising competition from Uber and Lyft and historically low gas prices for some of that time. Finally, I just want to take a moment to talk about the racial dimension of this, of access to opportunity, because it's important to understand this, and it's important to understand how the problem of racial equity interacts with your financial situation and your geography. So when we calculate access to opportunity by race, so what's over in the far right column here is how many jobs can somebody get to in 45 minutes? So what's sort of the universe of jobs that they could compete for, just in terms of their ability to get to them? And what you see is that it is better than average for white folks and Asian folks, and quite a bit worse than average for Black or African American folks. The other thing to notice, though, if you look at the first column, is that the problem isn't the area they can get to. They can all get to about the same amount of area. The problem is that the area that Black folks can get to tends to have fewer jobs in it. That's very important. The geography of that looks like this. If I just map the city according to how many jobs are within 2 miles, you see right away that the parts of the city that are predominantly Black in the far south are just further from everything. And if you live down there, I probably don't need to tell you that. To live in the far south side is to just be further from everything. As a result, we have a situation in Chicago where providing the same amount of service to Black folks as to white folks doesn't take the Black folks as far because they have to go further on average. And that's the shape of your racial equity problem and why it's difficult. Now, obviously, this is a land use and development problem rooted in historic discrimination. I don't need to tell you about that, but it is very important when you look at this chart not to jump to the conclusion that CTA is doing something inequitable or discriminatory. CTA is deploying service as fairly as it can. It's just that the geography is creating this barrier to Black folks, especially in the far south side, who are just further from the things they need and therefore need more service to do the same things. So there's a trade-off between equity and ridership. Many Black and Latino areas in the far south and west need more transit per person to access the same level of opportunity. So this is a question about when you talk about equity, what's the thing you're going to try to equalize? Is it how many places people can get to? Or is it simply the quantity of service we provide? And what you're seeing is if you just equalize the quantity of service you provide, that isn't enough to equalize their access to opportunity because they have a harder transportation problem because they are just further from things. So their service tends to be more expensive per passenger. We have to carry them further, which costs more. So if the only goal is ridership, that service is hard to justify. So here's the challenge. Without new funding, CTA will face a painful choice between ridership and equity because, as you know, right now, public funding carries a 50% fare box recovery requirement, which I would add is utterly unrealistic by US standards now, utterly unrealistic since the pandemic, pretty unrealistic even before the pandemic. If that continues to be the measure, if that continues to be the measure and you don't have any more resources to run more service, you cannot address the equity needs of disadvantaged areas in Chicago. The ridership requirement will prohibit you from doing that. So to improve equity, the options are either to change the performance standard or expand funding, or maybe both. One other beat of good news, though, one other thing you can work on that doesn't involve a trade-off is speed. Chicago's local buses are very slow. Faster service, anything you can do to speed up the service means several good things. You get a nonlinear payoff here. Faster service is less expensive to operate because we pay for transit by time, not distance. We pay drivers by the hour, not the mile. Faster service is good for ridership, and faster service is good for equity because it helps people get out of those very remote parts of the city and get to more opportunities quickly. But improving speeds requires reallocating street space and building new infrastructure to give buses priority. And that's another thing that I know you're working on. So with that, I'll pass it back to Molly.
Thanks. Thank you so much. So what Jarrett walked through, that's the framing report. The analysis that came from Jarrett and his team is now setting us up for the public conversation about bus vision. And he talked about this a little bit as it relates to speed and what we're working on. The Better Streets for Buses plan, you can really think of this as the sibling to bus vision. Bus vision is really the conversation about the network design. What does the service look like? Better Streets for Buses is the conversation about what does the street infrastructure look like? How do we speed up buses on the street? How do we give priority to buses on the street? And so we really see both of these projects working in tandem and both being necessary. You wouldn't want to do one without the other. You really want to tackle both the network redesign and having the conversation with the public about the network and about the service that they want, as well as having then the conversation again with the community and also with our partners at CDOT about what does the street infrastructure need to look like? How do we prioritize bus on the street? So as I mentioned, we are starting the public conversation. We did launch that in the beginning of July. We've had a number of survey responses that have come in from customers and residents. We also have done a pop-up event at the Austin Town Hall Farmers Market, and we've been engaged with transit advocacy groups throughout the community to expand the reach, to start to have the conversation with the customers about those trade-offs. And so really when we talk about the trade-offs, and Jarrett hit on this a little bit, is ridership and equity, and what are the other components of the service that riders want us to prioritize? How do they want us to think about bus stop spacing, for example? Where maybe are we missing service in our network that has new ridership that we should start to try to capture? What do we want to think about frequency? So those are really all of the conversations that the framing report analyzed and that then we're now having with our riders on how do we start to prioritize that, and how that will ultimately manifest itself is within the CTA service standards and policies. And so within those CTA service standards and policies, that's how we detail our service standards. It's how we determine the frequency and the network. And so how part of the conversation is how could CTA make different choices? And the service standards and policies basically allow us to do that and changing conditions from one year to another. And so when we start to have the conversation with the public and get that feedback in, we'll update those service standards to start to reflect what the community wants to see and start to make sure that the community is telling us, we want you to prioritize equity, for example. That's where we want. So that means our service standards start to change, right? And so that's where we're in conversations now and where we're moving. And then the last slide is just, we did an initial review. Oh, sorry, Jarrett, next slide. We've done the initial outreach, and then in the fall, we're doing even more pop-up events. Additionally, we have a scope that we are finalizing to have a further expanded community outreach activities. The scope will be released through our general planning contract here towards the end of the year, and we will then be doing outreach throughout the end of 2024 into 2025, and then we anticipate having a bus vision recommendation report issued towards late 2025, and then my team will begin working on how do we implement those service standards? How do we start looking at ensuring that we make those changes to our bus service that is reflective of what the community is asking for? And if you'll permit me, I just want to give a quick shout out to two individuals on my team who have worked very hard on this. John Sherwinski, who's the director of service planning and traffic planning, and then Jen Henry, who is the director of strategic planning. Both of them have been working diligently on the bus vision throughout the last couple of years with Jarrett Walker and Associates, and then they'll also continue to move this forward over the next couple of years. Garrett, is there anything that I missed that you wanted to touch on?
No, I think you covered it, Molly.
Great. Any questions, directors? You have questions for myself or questions for Jarrett?
Yeah, no, thank you. I really appreciated the overall report and us spending effort into understanding where and how different components play a role in our bus service particularly. I appreciated the data a lot, so thank you. I'm also wondering, as we're looking, so two things. If you're doing surveys, often that requires internet access. And so often we've also identified that in communities with lower incomes, communities of color, their access to the internet is just slightly harder. So if we can think through that as well as we're looking to collect more surveys, it'd be great to kind of think through that as well. And then the other part is, I know this is a great process and it takes time, but in the meantime, are we coordinating anything with CDOT so that we're advancing things on a parallel track versus just waiting for this and then moving on to how do we start?
Yeah, and so we have the Better Streets for Buses plan. We've launched the Better Streets for Buses corridor study. So we'll start studying. That's actually out on the street right now for RFP, I believe. And so the 5 corridors that we'll be studying will be in that studying process. So that is moving forward. But then additionally, we have bus priority zones, which is a conversation that we work with CDOT to identify different pinch points along a bus route that we can make strategic infrastructure investments to speed up the bus now. So what I would say is all of these are moving on dual tracks. We're looking at where can we do quick investments now. Maybe they're not a whole corridor. They're those specific pinch points. And where can we sort of set ourselves up for this longer term revisioning? And then I would note as well on the service side, we announced last week the extension of Ashland Avenue route. So that's something that we continue to work on and continue to look for. Where are those extensions? Where are those sort of realignment of routes that we can start doing now that we know make sense while we wait for the bus vision? Because you're right. We don't want to say, hey, we're studying something, and then 3 years later, we finally actually implement something. We want to be able to start saying and take the lessons and learnings that Jarrett has provided us already and start putting those into practice now.
Thank you.
There's other questions? Director Riccio? Oh, I'm sorry, President Carter.
Thank you. I obviously don't have a question, but I would like to talk a little bit about the report itself and the findings that came out of it. And I think that one of the things that I hope you took away from Mr. Walker's comments is that there's a lot of similarity between what he has been saying about what's going on with our bus system and its impact, and you've heard me say about what's been going on with CTA in general. I also would want to remind you that to really focus on his comments about the funding aspect of this discussion, because that quite honestly is the discussion we're having with Springfield right now. The reality is, and Mr. Walker didn't go through the entire history of CTA service cuts, but that history goes back to the 1970s. And if you look at the service, the bus service in particular we were providing back then compared to what we're providing today, it's like night and day. I agree 100% with Mr. Walker's conclusions about the impact of what our service looks like today. And the reality is our inability to restore that service, particularly overnight and weekends, is a direct result of the funding issue that we've been facing that have been deteriorating with CTA for decades. But when I talk about inequities of funding formula and how it is particularly treated CTA, that's what I'm talking about. That's the visual representation of the issue that I've been raising and the reason why we're going to fix this problem. We need to fix it right. We have spent way too long patching together a system of funding that has only resulted in inequitable outcomes, particularly to communities of low income and color. And the opportunity to fix that is where we are today. That is why this discussion is so important. And that is why at the end of this discussion, we need to end up not only with more money, but an allocation of that money in a way that allows us to provide the level of services that we are uniquely capable of and responsible for in this.
President Carter, it would seem to me that this has been one of the clear-cut cases that I've seen articulated. It talks about the inequity. I think this would be an excellent opportunity for those legislators who represent and make up the districts here in the urban area, in our service area, to actually get this briefing. Because I think he articulated very clearly the disparity in services and ties us to the funding as well, as you just said. So clearly, I think that this would be a good tool to gain further support through our legislators if they saw this kind of information. I hadn't seen it laid out quite like this, but I thought this was a presentation.
We have certainly had that conversation, Molly and I, about how we get this report more widely distributed, and in particular, the possibility of having Mr. Walker testify, particularly at the Transportation Committee hearing, so that he can present to them the same conclusions that we have reached around all of this. As you know, I have been asked over and over again about what the future would look like if we got the money that we asked for. And I keep reminding people that the future in many ways looks like the past. It starts with just restoring what we used to provide at a level that allows us to provide the service that we need. Then you start talking about what else you would do above and beyond that. But you can't just erase the history of what's happened at CTA and then just say, we'll just start fresh from here. Because we're in a hole in terms of our service, in terms of our equity. And there's an opportunity now to fix that. And I agree that we need to make sure that everyone, including our local elected officials, understand what Mr. Walker has, I think, clearly laid out and what we have been trying to articulate for months as part of the bigger problem here that needs to be addressed. And I'm prepared to do that.
Other questions or comments? Director Ricao?
Just in the same line as President Carter was mentioning, there's one slide that has a statement saying that this is a land use and a development problem rooted in historic discrimination, which is a way of saying racist policies that have been going on in the city for a century plus. If that is the root problem, I think we need to go to the root cause to fix all this. It was clear in the presentation, but I think it could be made clearer, as the president was mentioning, by doing two things. One is to show that history of policies, decisions that were made, unfortunately by CTA2 at some point, and go back before the 70s, because this is connected to redlining and many other policies that destroyed neighborhoods in Chicago. And I think that part, we could make it more explicit and name, how this happened, Department of Planning, Department of Transportation, all the elements that came together to start dismantling infrastructure that existed in our neighborhoods. So that part I think would be helpful as we think about presenting to legislators and others, as well as the voice of the community themselves who were affected by this, because the ones who know the best what happened to their neighborhoods are the community-based organizations that used to have a vibrant, walkable community served by streetcars and then with buses and trolleys, etc. They got nothing now. So that part I think would be helpful to include in next versions of this, because the maps are always helpful to see things at the high level, but they don't go to the heart of people that the way they could be. And then the second comment would be, there is this other map where we show more recently the dismantling of service that took place in 2007 and versus today, right? The comparison of the two. In the context of those conversations we're having around funding with legislators, there's been a lot of doom scenario and what would happen if, right? And that's fine to scare people, but we don't have the joyous scenario, right? And the joyous scenario would be how much do we need to bring this back, right? And what would be the cost first of doing like the basic justice that we need to do just to return to 2007. But I would appreciate some of the costs of scenarios that go above and beyond what this bare minimum is, and what would it take? The cost be to get people excited about what's possible with that $1.5 billion that people are asking about, rather than concentrating on all the doom and all the gloom that will happen if we don't get the funding. So just those two comments.
I'll be bringing some joy in about an hour, so we'll have some joy.
You're fast.
Director Jakes,
It's all fine, thank you.
Director Eady.
What came to me as I was reviewing this is the access to opportunity by race. And I concur with Chairman Barclay. Certainly, as I look at this, those legislators, especially those locally that represent Hispanic, Latino, Black, or African American, I think this is something that needs to be definitely shared with them in light of this. This was quite eye-opening for me to see this in this format. And I take it just even maybe one step further, because sometimes it takes the community to lay some pressure on the legislators and our elected officials. Some kind of way, this kind of information needs to get down to a community level. Community organizations, they need to understand this as well and see this as I have seen it today. And I think that as troubling as it was for me to see it, realize that this can be corrected. I think that from that community organization level, leaning on elected officials, I think we can begin to see this thing moving, especially in terms of identifying or pushing for more funding. So that's my view.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Molly.
Great. Thank you, Jared.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. As mentioned before, I'm Rosa Ortiz, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Strategic Planning Committee. I would like to officially now call to order our September 11 meeting of the Committee on Strategic Planning and Service Delivery. Bridget, can you please call the roll?
Director Ortiz.
Here.
Director Requejo.
Present.
Chairman Barclay.
Here.
Director Ortiz, you do have a quorum. I will also note for the record that we have Director Jakes in the meeting and Director Eady in the meeting.
Our next order of business is the approval of the December 13, 2023 meeting. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Next.
It's been moved by Director Requejo, seconded by Chairman Barclay, that the minutes from the December 13th, 2023 meeting be approved. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Requejo?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you. Since there is no further business to conduct, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Chairman Barclay? It's been moved by Director Requejo, seconded by Chairman Barclay, that the Meeting be adjourned. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Raquel?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
The motion passes. Director Ortiz?
Adjourn.
Director Jakes?
Ready? Good morning. I would like to call to order the September 11th, 2024 meeting of the Committee Finance, Audit, and Budget. Georgette, would you please call the roll?
Director Jakes?
Here.
Director Ortiz?
Here.
Director Raquel?
Present.
Director Eady?
Here.
Chairman Barclay?
Here.
Director Jakes, you do have a quorum. I will note for the record that Director Lee is absent and Director Jha is absent.
Thank you. Our first order of business is the approval of the committee minutes of August 14th, 2024. May I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Director Eady?
Second.
It's been moved by Director Raquel, seconded by Director Eady, that the minutes from the August 14th, 2024 meeting of the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee be approved. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Raquel?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Eady?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Our next order of business is the finance report. Tom McComb.
All right, good morning, directors. Tom McCone, CFO. Let me grab the presentation here and share it. Like we have it up there. Okay. Let me start by going through the revenues here for the month of July. Go to that page. Okay, so for the month of July, good results. We have fair and pass totals 1.1 million positive to budget. That's driven primarily by our pass products. In particular, the shorter duration passes, the 1 and the 3 day passes perform particularly well in July, as you might expect in the summer, as we have folks coming to town looking to use those types of passes. On the non-fare box side, the reduced fare subsidy is coming in at budget. That's our state subsidy. And then the non-fare box revenue is positive to budget due primarily to investment income. And that's the positive impact of those rates, which remain particularly high right now. So we're getting positive results there. Overall revenue for the month is up 1.4 million to budget, and then 4.3 million better than we were in July of last year. Moving on to the year-to-date totals. You'll see a similar story. The numbers change a little bit. You'll see that we have a $3.7 million positive variance on fare and pass total. As we just saw, July was about a third of that positive variance. So highlights the benefit that we had in July. On the non-fare box side, 3.5 million positive to budget for the year to date. Overall, 7.2 million positive to budget on the revenue side. On the expenses, taking a look at the month. So for labor, coming in positive to budget, so 3.6 million positive to budget on the labor side. Material and power basically at budget, so a little bit of timing on the material side driving that negative variance. Fuel was positive to budget primarily because a little bit lower than anticipated usage. Purchase of security services is negative to budget. We anticipate that as we've purchased additional security services this year beyond what was initially budgeted. But that additional expense is absorbed within the other expense categories, as you can see here. So total operating expenses then for the month, 8.5 million positive to budget on the expense side. For the year to date, again, a similar story. The categories are driven primarily by some of those similar factors that we saw in July. So overall for the year, we're 68.2 million positive to budget on the expenses side. Looking at our public funding. Overall, pretty much coming in right at budget for the month in July. So sales tax is performing a little bit better than we anticipated. The real estate transfer tax performing a little bit worse than expected. We'll continue to watch this one as we finish the year. Projected those interest rates coming down. We might see additional real estate transactions here in the second half of the year. And then year to date, again, pretty much right on budget. So $500 million collected so far this year, 1.4 million lower than we expected. Again, that's being driven by the negative variance in the real estate transfer tax, but we do expect to see some recovery here if we do see those interest rates lower later this year. So all those add up to our federal relief funding draws for the month. So closing out that gap, we drew down $39.3 million of that federal relief funding from various categories. Overall, we have $810 million remaining. So slightly better because of those positive variances on both revenue and expenses. And then looking at our commodities, what I'm going to show you here, we don't have any changes for the month of July, but I will note that we did see a dip recently in the price of fuel. And so we've made some additional purchases recently to lock in some of that 2026 fuel volume. So when we talk next month, those numbers will increase, taking advantage of that recent dip in the price of oil. That concludes my report. I'm available for any questions.
The 810 million that's left in the federal relief, that'll carry us through the end of 2026.
We're anticipating that it should carry us through the end of 2025, and then we'll use that up. And so in 2026, we need additional funding.
And if Springfield provides the money that need, then we can extend it.
That would be the idea, right? So additional funding to fill in the gap of that, what in July was 39.3 million that we needed to fill the gap between our revenues and expenses.
And so it's not a spend it or lose it type of deal with the government.
Correct. We are on pace to use it within the time that they've allocated for it. So yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Sure.
I have no further questions.
Director Raquel?
No questions.
Director Ortiz?
No questions. Thank you.
Chairman Barclay?
No questions.
Director Eady?
No questions.
Director Jakes, there are no further questions. You may now move to agenda item number 4.
Agenda item 4 is something of an ordinance authorizing a temporary right of entry agreement with Union Pacific Railroad Company for the Red Line Extension Project. Phil Mooney.
Good morning, Bill Mooney, your Chief Infrastructure Officer. Staff recommends approval of an ordinance authorizing a temporary right of entry agreement with the Union Pacific Railroad for work that may require access to UPRR's property in support of the Red Line Extension Project. The temporary right of entry agreement will allow CTA and its contractors to access UPRR's property, as well as reimburse UPRR and/or its designees for 100% of the actual costs and expenses incurred for the work under this agreement. UPRR requires CTA to enter into a standard temporary right of entry agreement for the work that may require access and to reimburse UPRR to evaluate and monitor RLE work to ensure safety, maintain the quality of rail service, and protect UPRR's property. This agreement covers all areas that work will occur parallel to the UPRR, and CTA will pay UPRR an amount not to exceed $192,000 to access the property, as well as reimburse an amount not to exceed $450,000 for work required to evaluate and monitor. The agreement term is 6 years or upon completion of the project, whichever is sooner. Be happy to take any questions on this item.
No, I have no questions, Phil. Thank you.
Director Raquel?
No questions.
Director Ortiz?
No questions.
Chairman Barclay?
No questions.
Director Eady?
No questions.
Director Jakes, there are no further questions.
May I now have the place this item on this for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Raquel, seconded by Director Eady, that this ordinance be placed on the omnibus for board approval. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Raquel?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay? Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Eady?
Yes.
Director Jakes, the motion passes. We may now move to agenda item number 6. Five.
Purchase and sales award recommendations, contracts numbers A1. Our next order of business is the review of these contracts for transit operations. I have no questions.
Director Raquel, any questions?
No questions.
Director Ortiz?
No.
Chairman Barclay?
None.
Director Eady?
None.
Director Jakes, there are no questions. You may now proceed to contracts number B1 through B5.
The review of these contracts, awards for infrastructure. I have no questions.
We'll take questions from other members of the board. Director Raquel, any questions?
No questions.
Director Ortiz, any questions?
None.
Chairman Barclay?
None.
Director Eady, any questions?
Yes, I did have a question, just trying to locate the area, but it was concerning, oh yeah, here it is. B3, we're there, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Director Eady.
Yeah. I saw that there had been previous, and when I see all these change orders, it always raises questions for me. And so I guess my question was, what has been occurring that maybe was not originally taken into consideration, why it has continued and has increased almost 50%?
So I'm actually glad you asked that question because you're going to probably start seeing some more of these. We have a new requirement by the FTA that at the time of bid or proposal submission, that we ask for a list of the contractors, subcontractors that they reached out to help them perform this work. And it's quite a bit of information they want to have about that. That was not a requirement that we had before. It's a brand new one. Typically, what we try to do is we'll say submission at time of bid or proposal or within 5 days of our request to give them a little bit of time in case they don't submit it with their bid. And then we have a little bit of time where we can get it. We get the requirement accomplished before it's awarded. But in this instance, for this bidders list, the federal government is not allowing that. They want it submitted at time of proposal. So we are reaching out. We've reached out, my staff has, to these two bidders on this to tell them exactly what it is that we need and to let them know. And we're working with diversity, but we're gonna have some kind of a training or pre-proposal meetings for these federally funded contracts. Because a lot of times the same bidders or proposers submit bids and proposals time after time. So when we introduce something new to them, a lot of times they don't see it. So we're gonna really try to bring it to their attention. But they do ask for quite a bit of information. So I am anticipating that until the bidders or proposals get used to it, that we're gonna run into this problem.
Okay, thank you.
I have your name. Sure, I'm sorry, Ellen McCormick, Vice President of Purchasing and Supply Chain.
Director Jakes, there are no further questions. You may now move to contract C1.
C1 is a contract award for finance. No questions.
Director Raquel, any questions? Director Ortiz, any questions?
No questions.
Chairman Barclay, any questions? No. Director Eady?
No questions.
Director Jakes, there are no further questions. You may now move to contract F1.
F1 is a contract award for administration. No questions.
Director Raquel, any questions?
No questions.
Director Ortiz?
No, thank you.
Chairman Barclay?
No question.
Director Eady?
No question.
Director Jakes, you may now advance to contract G1.
G1 is a contract award for technology. No questions.
Director Raquel?
No question.
Director Ortiz? Chairman Barclay? Director Eady?
No questions.
Director Jakes, there are no additional questions and there are no further contracts.
Since there are no further contracts, I'm sorry, no further questions on the contracts. May I have placed 9 contracts on the omnibus?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Raquel, seconded by Director Eady, that the 9 contracts be placed on the omnibus for board approval. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Raquel?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Eady?
Yes.
Director Jakes, the motion passes.
Since there's no further business to come before the committee, may I have a motion to approve the omnibus and recommend the omnibus for board approval?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Raquel, seconded by Director Eady, that the omnibus be approved and recommended for board approval. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Raquel?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Eady?
Yes.
Director Jakes, the motion passes.
And finally, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that the meeting be adjourned by Director Raquel and by Director Eady. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Raquel?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Eady?
Yes.
Director Jakes, the motion passes.
then this meeting is adjourned.
Do we need to take a bio break? Is everyone okay?
4 minutes, yeah.
Oh, you have 4 minutes to take a bio break. How about that?
Yeah.
To order the meeting of the Chicago Transit Board for September 11th, 2024.
We'll call the roll. Director Raquel,
Present.
Director Ortiz,
Here.
Chairman Barclay,
Here.
Director Jakes,
Here.
Director Eady,
Here.
Chairman Barclay, you do have a quorum. We will note for the record that Director Ja is absent and Director Michelle Lee is absent.
Thank you. Before we begin today's agenda, I'd like to take a moment to address the recent tragic events that occurred last week. As most of you are aware, we lost 4 of our riders to a horrific shooting aboard one of our trains in Forest Park on Labor Day. Additionally, one of our employees was shot and injured in a separate incident that occurred outside the Howard Street station. Both incidents are deeply disturbing, and our hearts go out to the victims of these tragic events, as well as to our employees that are experiencing trauma from them. I'd also like to acknowledge the significance of today as we mark the anniversary of September 11th.
Yes.
Today holds deep meaning, not only for our nation, for people across the world. We remember the thousands of lives lost, the families forever changed, and the courage of the first responders and ordinary citizens who stepped up in the face of an unimaginable tragedy. Their strength and resilience continue to inspire us. Our Citizens Advisory Board recently met, and CAB Chair Raby started the meeting with a moment of silence to reflect on the recent events on CTA and honor the victims, those impacted. I appreciate her modeling empathetic and thoughtful leadership, and would like our board to do the same by taking a moment of silence at this time for those impacted by the recent events on our system, as well as remembering September 11th. I ask that you pause for a moment of silence and remembrance. Thank you very much. Our next order of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular board meeting of August 14th, 2024. I have a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Raquel, seconded by Director Eady, that the minutes of August 14th, 2024 be approved. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Raquel?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Eady?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay, the motion passes.
We're going to go out of order. Our next order of business is public comment.
Chairman Barclay, we have 4 public comments for today. 2 are registered and 2 have arrived this morning. I would like to welcome our public commenters to our meeting. Thank you for coming. Your perspective is important to us. I would like to note that the public comment session, each person gets 3 minutes to speak. And we are timing you, and I will let you know when your 3 minutes are up. We will start with Mr. George Lakemore. I would like for you to sit right there in front of that microphone and speak into the microphone. Thank you very much.
I'm at home at CTA and these other public agencies. I feel very comfortable and relaxed. However, hearing and reading about the incident of those 4 people getting murdered. Now, when I ride, I use public transportation. I use the bus and the subway. And it must be safe for our citizens. And so I have seen these cameras there. I'm thinking that as a human being watching this camera. And I'm very secure. But knowing that you go back a week or so many days later and watch the camera. The new technology is already here. Why is it that CTA is not embracing this new technology? So it's something wrong here. So you give us a sense of with these cameras that if no harm would come to us because somebody is monitoring these cameras, which is not true. So my question is, why can't CTA embrace the new technology? Why are you still using this antiquated technology? Human life is very important. Now, the next, also, I have a problem with right there on Chicago, on the Vision and LaSalle. This shelter is gone. It was brought to my attention that some people were doing cracking drugs or whatever. You don't throw the baby out with the bath water. You go to these people and say, you can't hang out. This is not a place to hang out. You work with the police department. And then if they don't move, you can arrest them because this is a public place. So it's unacceptable. I am demanding, not asking, that shelter go back up because all up and down the cell, they have shelters. When you go on the west side, you see people hanging out in these shelters. You don't take them all down. Coming inclement weather now, raining and snowing, and then I want to know the timing up there when the next bus is arriving. Put it back. I'm demanding, not asking you. So somebody demanded that you take them down. These rich whites in that area. They say these blacks were playing that music so loud, they wanted to get rid of them. That's not the way to get rid of them, denying me. So I'm not asking you, I'm telling you, put it back. Put that shelter back. Put it back. When I'm finished. Why do I have to go out and snow and rain and sleep? It's not gonna happen, and I wanna feel safe when I ride public transportation. Embrace this new technology.
Our next public commentator is Carol Sheridan.
I finished this all I wanted to go. Put it back.
Ms. Sheridan, you have 3 minutes and your time starts now.
I'm trying to think. Last November, there was an accident on the Skokie Swift. Train ran into a snowplow. Now, they never told how this accident happened, but they did like an investigation that lasted over 2 months. No one could ride the train. And then they cut the speed of the train from 55 to 35 miles an hour. And then a few weeks later, they cut the service. Trains used to run a couple of years ago. It was 10 minutes during rush hour, 15 minutes midday. For over 60 years, this train had been running every 15 minutes midday, and they cut it to every 20 minutes. And prior to rush hour, you used to wait 20 minutes for a train. You have to wait longer for a train than you do the 97 bus. And for years, this train has been running over people. Not in recent years, but people would stand on the tracks and the train would run them over, and they never cut the speed of the train. They never cut the service. I want the speed restored and the service restored. I mean, they do this, but they don't take the train. And there is an article in the Tribune from July saying that you've increased the service on all the transit lines except the Skokie Swift. The Skokie Swift, you cut it. I would like it restored to what it used to be. And Metro runs over people all the time, and they never cut the service. They never cut the speed. Anyways, all right. There's another thing, the 90 Harlem bus. They're renovating the L station, Blue Line and O'Hare Line, the Blue Line. The buses are stopping on Harlem, north of Bryn Mawr. I want the bus to let me off of south of Bryn Mawr. And I call up about this. And they say, oh, they're doing construction work there. I said, there's no construction work there. It's at the train station.
5 seconds remaining.
5 seconds. Anyways, I think the buses stop there because 423 bus has to wait for people there.
And that's time.
Oh,
Thank you, Ms. Sheriff.
oh.
Our next public commenter is Patricia Fuentes.
My name is Patricia Puente. I'm not complaining. I just have some concerns. I don't know why people keep on saying that I'm a complainer. If I see something, I say something. My first thing is that the emergency buttons from the CTA bus, train, do not work. There was this guy fighting with this girl. I pressed the button of Ketsy to inform emergency because that's what it says. He cut his throat. Nobody showed up. I went downstairs. There was no attendant. Okay, please check your buttons, emergency buttons. Midway elevator. We had a lot of people coming for the race car. We had a lot of visitors. The elevator of Midway doesn't work. I even had to help some people get their luggages all the way to the Midway airport. Come on, guys. That's the Midway airport. Please fix your elevators. Because they have always been down. It's not like they're being fixed. They have always been down. CTA attendance. Your CTA attendance, the CTA train, they sit on the thing that where you have to punch in and then you turn on the rails to go in. They're sitting on them. I even had to tell one of them, you're gonna break it. Oh no, nothing happens. This is what we always do. Please, don't destroy the properties. If you want more money, then you're gonna have to fix them again. The bus stops. Can you guys work with the law enforcement? Bus stops. I've had to tell people to move their cars because the bus stop, this is the bus stop where the buses stop. They have even told me one time, it was in Hispanic, he started telling me I don't know English. I told him, okay, bus move because the bus stop here and they cannot stop because your car is in front. Later on, I told these kids, you know what, your father, he had 3 kids in the back, told me your father is not following the rules and regulations. And then he turns around, he tells me, don't be talking to my kids. What happened? I thought he said that he didn't know how to speak English. That's another one. The other one is kudos to one of your drivers. A bus driver, ID number 63890, accommodations for her on 95th and 61st yesterday. Even though her bus said not on service, she still stopped to pick up the people and take them, you know, that's her route. She was still gonna go that way. I hope everybody does that. And diversity in the workplace.
That's time. Thank you, Ms.
Given people to come different diversities, they have come and they said that they've never been hired. You know, they don't even
Thank you.
Diversity, more diversity, not only African Americans and Hispanics, please. Thank you. That's it. Have a nice one, everybody.
Thank you.
Our last public commenter for today is Antoine Members. Welcome.
Thank you.
Morning. Thank you for having me and thank you for the honor and to able to speak before you, ladies and gentlemen. I came here July 17 talking about, I talked about quite a few issues, but I did emphasize on public safety and how we need to consider to have an in-house police force. Now, I heard that you had it prior years ago, but I believe that should be in consideration. Also, the 4 victims, most likely was minorities, most likely probably was predominantly Black people. They didn't say that in the, they didn't mention that in the media reports or what race they were, but I'm assuming that they was predominantly Black. Black people represent 70, now, the homeless population represents 70% is African-American, the homeless. And what I've seen over the years is the divestment in housing, divestment in mental health, and the sister agencies of CTA have pretty much did that action. And I believe that the leaders here has to be more interdisciplinary in issues and not be restricted just for transportation, because it's a confluency of issues that these 4 victims are facing. Mental health issues, housing issues, apparently, poverty. So I believe that if the leaders here find a way to talk with the sister agency, how can we invest in public safety? It's just not one way, because it's a very complicated issue. We have to make sure we can mobilize mental health workers, possibly, get on these trains and see how they can help the homeless population on the CTA transit. That's been going on for quite some time. These individuals didn't just sleep that night on that unfortunate night, but they were sleeping on that transportation probably prior, most likely prior. So we have to mobilize sister agencies, CHA, CPS, City of Chicago. There has to be a partnership somehow, because this is a very complex issue. And right now we see a decree from the federal judge now. Now people with guns can come on at CTA now. So we can't bring a knife to a gunfight. We have to make sure that we have possibly law enforcement with, of course, they have guns. Because security in itself cannot really deal with that issue because they don't have the training enough to deal with people who are armed. Just not happen. I've been in law enforcement for 2 decades. They have inferior training compared to law enforcement. These are facts. So hopefully that you can find a way to maybe do a lateral transfer from other places to get law enforcement on these platforms.
Mr. Members, you're at your time.
I don't have time. Okay, we give me about just 2 seconds. I just hope, I know you're not at the behest of the public because we did not elect you. But hopefully, what I'm telling you, put it in consideration. Let's get the in-house police going. I know it takes more than just that. Mobilize mental health workers and so we can address these issues. And I'll keep you guys in prayer. Hopefully, God will give you the wisdom to able to make the right calls. But thank you very much for the opportunity and the grace. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have no other public commentators for today.
Our next item of business on the agenda is our report given by President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Good morning.
Morning.
I'd like to begin my report with a discussion of the 2 incidents that occurred over the past 10 days. As you're aware, we had 4 individuals who had tragically lost their lives on Labor Day aboard a Viewline train work bus due to an unspeakable act of senseless gun violence. This disturbing incident deeply troubles us all, including CTA employees, our customers, and anyone who leaves the sanctity of life. Unfortunately, The next day at our Howard station, a CTA employee was shot right outside of our facility. I want you to know that I've since visited our employee in the hospital. I am happy to report that he is recovering from his gunshot wound. While these incidents give us great pause, with regards to the Forest Park shooting, I want to at least take a moment to acknowledge every CTA employee who worked so tirelessly in a variety of ways to assist the police investigation and help to quickly bring the Blue Line shooter to justice. That staff worked diligently to support law enforcement efforts, and I'm thankful to everyone who worked so hard to catch that shooter. Law enforcement officials believe that both of these incidents. I want to reiterate that the safety of our employees and customers is always a paramount concern. It is one of the reasons why we work so closely with the Chicago Police Department and specifically their public transportation section that provides law enforcement for the vast majority of our transit system. In addition to our relationship with CPD, we also obviously partner with other police departments, including Cook County Sheriff's Department, as well as suburban police departments, including Evanston, Oak Park, and of course, Forest Park. At a recent press conference where I was asked about the question of safety and what I'm doing to make our system safe, I thought it was important to point out the complexities of the system, such as Chicago Transit Authority. As you know, we provide about 1 million rides a day, which is the equivalent of the city of Indianapolis every day on our system. We have nearly 1,900 buses, 1,500 rail cars, 145 rail stations, 16,000 bus stops. We travel 224 miles of rail every day. And it is a very complex system to provide safety to. What we do is engage in a number of efforts that we hope will help mitigate the risk of crime and other activity on CTA. Those items include the recent expansion of unarmed guards and two-person canine teams, which were deployed on our system 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The funding of a voluntary special employment program which provides volunteer off-duty police officers to patrol our system. The creation of the Strategic Decision Support Center, which features smart policing technology and full connectivity to CTA's extensive security camera network, as well as detectives who are dedicated to CTA-related crime. We recently expanded our comprehensive networks of more than 33,000 security cameras. And we also benefit from the additional support that we get from district police officers who will assist and respond to incidents in our system, separate and apart from the dedicated mass transit police. But I think it's important to point out that the issues that we're seeing on public transit reflect a very larger, very complex issue around the communities that we serve. It is imperative that we have a broader conversation about what we are doing as a community to address issues related to crime, drug use, supporting those who are unhoused and struggling with addiction, mental health, and guns. As you know, CT has engaged the City of Chicago's Department of Family and Support Services, as well as the Night Ministry, and are providing millions of dollars each year to provide additional outreach through social service agencies to unhoused individuals and those who are dealing with mental health challenges. And that work will never be done. CT will continue to work hard to collaborate with and coordinate with our partners, be it city departments and sister agencies, to do everything we can to possibly keep our customers as safe as possible. But at the end of the day, there is a need to have a bigger conversation about what's going on in our communities and why we are dealing with the problems that we're seeing on CTA. Many of you heard me say on many an occasion that CTA is a reflection of the communities that we serve. It is the ultimate social experiment in which, regardless of race, income, social background, or education, We come together and have one common experience, which is riding public transportation. There's a great value in that commonality experience that I hope provides a human touch to what all of us should care about as a society. But there's also a challenge that comes with that because we are an open system. Anyone who's willing to pay is allowed to ride. And that means regardless of your background, regardless of your criminal history, regardless of any other issues that may be out there, you can get on that train or bus and ride it right along with everyone else. That creates a unique challenge that exists for public transportation more than anything else. It's a challenge that we'll continue to work diligently to try to address as best we can. But with the understanding, this is not an excuse, but this is a reality. We cannot do this alone. We need the support of the very communities that we serve to address the underlying issues that we see play out on CTA every single day. I will continue to work diligently to support that. I will continue to work diligently to take whatever additional steps we think makes sense to support the concerns that we have about safety on CTA. But I think it's important to recognize that CTA alone is not the solution to these problems, and we need help. The employees that I'm referencing, as you are very much aware, are some of the hardest working people in Chicago. And I would like to take a moment to at least pause and recognize some recent achievements when the eyes of the nation were on our city. Democratic National Convention ended on August 22nd, and by nearly any objective standard, it has been lauded as a tremendous success. I'm very happy to report that CTA did a tremendous job of supporting the community as well as the travel needs, but also maintaining great service while accommodating a huge influx of visitors. By all accounts, from anecdotes relayed to me to social networking posts, and even reports from a number of journalists and media outlets, the hardworking and dedicated family of CTA employees did a tremendous job, and I could not be more proud of them. Flaws our agency received were a direct result of the work of every CTA department, front lines to the back of the house, and at every level of the organization. For months, our staff planned for providing dedicated DNC bus shuttles, along with continuing our regular service. Staff also operated buses on newly planned routes, delivered rail service to special events, maintained our fleet and infrastructure, coordinated resources for safety and security, and showcased our system through new marketing, visuals, and CTA volunteers. From the outset, we told local and national officials that we could get this job done. That CTA has a long history of successfully supporting large events. And as they always do, the CTA employees who make Chicago move every single day showed up and made this city, the agency, and this president very proud. And to all of them, I say, bravo. Speaking of our employees, last Saturday, CJ's Skokie Shop facility hosted our Transit Jamboree. It was truly an extraordinary event. I realize that some of you may not be familiar with the Transit Jamboree, but the main draws for this day-long event are a rail rodeo and a bus rodeo competition, which feature events that challenge the skills and abilities of CJ's best employees. Participants compete in areas including bus operations, rail operations, bus maintenance, rail customer service, cleanliness and power, signal, and track service. And I can assure you, these skilled and tenacious workers come to compete. Since the COVID pandemic, this is the first Jamboree that we have held since 2019. During that period, CTA has hired more than 4,000 new employees. What that means is that 40% of our workforce had never had the opportunity to experience a Jamboree until this past weekend. More than 150 employees competed at the Jamboree, and as always, it was wonderful to see them show off their skills. Employees from across our operations and maintenance department demonstrated their high levels of expertise, not only impressing onlookers, but leaving no doubt why why CTA is in so many ways still among the best in the industry. I attended the Jamboree, and I can tell you, the event did not disappoint. More than 2,700 employees came out to support their competing coworkers and to enjoy the food, music, games, and more. Jamborees in years and past have always been a very good time. There was a sense of renewed celebratory spirit that I felt in this particular one, that I think affected everyone there. I was also happy to see the more than 100 invited retirees who also joined us for an alumni homecoming. I've long said that the CTA family of employees is a special group, and any long-time employee who comes back to spend time with us has their own reasons for celebrating CTA and our employees. I cannot say enough about this well-planned and beautifully executed event, which was included participation by the Chicago Police and Fire Departments, Cigna, as well as our wellness partners, children's activities, and a performance by the Jesse White Tumblers. Another wonderful jumping is me. Was a dunk tank, as you see here in the picture, that raised $2,800, which will be used to support CTA's holiday train. I'd like to thank the staff that volunteered to sit in the dunk tank, including several of our chiefs. In fact, as you may have noticed, this is our own Chief Infrastructure Officer, Bill Mooney, in this particular photo. I've been advised that everyone who sat above the tank left drenched, including Mr. Mooney. It was all for a very good cause and one that we were very happy to participate in. I want to thank everyone who worked so hard to support the Transit Jamboree and make it a reality. With a special tip of the hat to Jamboree co-chairs, Chief Transit Officer Don Bonds and Mr. Mooney. We are working very hard to improve the morale of our employees at CTA, something that has certainly suffered over the years because of a number of the challenges that we have faced. I can tell you, and I know that the chairman was with me from the same way, the spirit and morale of the employees at this event was through the roof. It was not only a great opportunity for our employees to enjoy some time together, but it was an opportunity for their families to experience it as well. And I would certainly encourage all of you, if you have the time in the future, to participate and attend this event because it is a really unique experience for CTA. Finally, last May, our staff, along with members of the Joint Urban Mobility and Transit Lab, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and the Argonne National Laboratory Vehicle and Mobility Systems Division provided you with a report entitled Mobility, Equity, and the Economic Impact of Transit in the Chicago Region, which I believe is a vital tool in the ongoing public discussion regarding the future of transit in Chicago, right along with the report that you heard this morning from Jared Walker. Argonne staff has now followed up with a second report that focuses on transit expansion and how transit investment can and will impact the Chicago region in the future. I've asked them to come here today to talk about these findings, and I'm going to ask CTA's Chief Planning Innovation Officer, Molly Poppy, who will introduce the representatives from Argonne that are joining us today to talk through this presentation and the results of their findings. Molly?
Done it. I know I do this thing all day, every day. Hold on. Oh, okay. It's not showing up for some reason. Okay. You drive here. Okay. Sorry about that. Good morning, directors. I'm Molly Poppy, Chief Planning and Innovation Officer for CTA. I'm joined by Amric Rousseau from Argonne, and Amric is the Director of Mobility and Vehicle Services. Is that right? And as President Carter mentioned, Argonne has built on the study that they did earlier this spring to look at what happens when you do adjust to transit. So what's that joy that you were talking about, Director Requejo. What does it mean to actually sustainably and equitably fund transit to drive a mobility outcome that I think we all want to see in the city? And so Amric is going to walk through this presentation about the results and what we really see as the benefits of investing in transit for the region. Amric?
Thank you, Moni. Good morning, everyone. So when we first met last May, we discussed what happened when we removed transit. And so the previous study obviously kind of was a doomsday scenario, right? Lots of congestions, lots of activities canceled, about $35 billion economic impact. This time around, what we wanted to do is actually looking at different ways and on how we can improve level of services through additional funding. So the baseline scenario is looking at a certain percentage of pre-COVID services on both CTA, base and metro. And but then we looked at two scenarios. The first one is short-term and really focused on transit-centric investments, improving frequency, increasing speed by 20% in certain corridors, adding BRTs in Ashland and Western, adding 95th and Ashley, Pearls for Pace, looking at Raglan extension, so on and so forth. So we also look at what happens when we're considering the entire system. So in addition to investing in transit, with increased frequency and what we discussed, we also are looking at what happens when you start to integrate land use. So now we're actually trying to attract population within the city, for example, with transit-oriented developments. Also looking at what happens when we increase transit, increase population, considering further reduction of car ownership per households. And we're estimating about 12% in the region, 13% in the city. So let's jump to the overall takeaways on improving the level of services. By considering both transit investment combined with land use and lower car ownership, we are looking at about a 53% increase in transit boarding throughout the region. What that means is that now we're flipping the script to the previous discussion that we had in May. We now are improving speed. We now are by 5%. We now have estimating a travel time saving by 9%. When we are looking at improve speed, we are looking at also savings in terms of energy and greenhouse gases. Right? We talk about PM 2.5. Those are very important. We also are estimating a 12% change in activity. So when we're combining time saving along with lower car ownership, we have about a 13% return on investments. Very similar, actually, about exactly the same than what we were discussing earlier. So let's dig into some of the details. We are predicting with these additional investments some transit mode share increase, about 25% short term, that's transit only focused, 43% long term in the city. And what it means is that, when we're looking at the transit modes, this is about a 9.4% to a 13.5%, mostly, again, driven in the long term by lower drive modes. One added benefit is now we have also increase in active mode. People walk more, right? When you take the train, as we were discussing in the first presentation, people walk to the train, take the train, and walk to another place, which is also has benefits. So those service improvements increase boarding. As we mentioned in the long term throughout the region, we are looking at about 53%, about a 700,000 increased transit boarding per day. So, and this is, consistent throughout all the agencies and throughout all the modes. So where do these increased boarding occur? The nice thing is we are looking at consistent improvements across the entire Chicago metro area, right? When we're looking at percent change in transit mode share or percentage change in transit boarding, they actually do occur throughout the region. So they do benefit everyone. In addition to benefiting transit riders, right? Again, we're looking at the system point of view. The more people take transit, the better for everyone. What we are looking at here is the vehicles traffic throughout the day, baseline in green, short term but long term in orange. So due to increased transit ridership, we have a major congestion relief, especially during peak hours. So a lot of the congestion improvements with improved average travel time, improved speed, actually would occur during morning and evening, so during rush hours. A lot of what also happens is reduction in vehicle mass travels. Vehicle mass travels have become a main target for most planning agencies throughout the US, right? The less cars you have on the roads, the lower the VMT, the better the congestion, the better the emissions, the better the overall access to mobility. Now, where do these vehicle mass travel reduction come from? Again, they come from, throughout the city. This is not really specific area, so everybody benefits from a better transit from the south side to the west side to the north side. Lower vehicle mass traveled means lower fuel, means obviously cost savings, but in that case, decrease in greenhouse gas emissions as well as pollutants, one of them, primary one being PM 2.5. So in short term, we're estimating about a 3 to 4% reduction in those metrics and about a 10 to 12% reduction in the longer term. So this is, again, significant. There is a lot of investments being done and research being done in CMAP right now. So transit, in order to achieve the region goals, definitely is a key. So who benefits from this? The increase in activity counts, we are predicting favors underserved community, mostly Black, very low, and income people in the city. So you can look here as a percentage in activities by race, by gender, and by income. So when we put all of this together, what does this mean from an economical point of view? The two main drivers here are travel time saving, which we're estimating using $30 per hour, and annual car ownership saving, which we're estimating using $10,000 per car, which is the US average right now. So for every dollar invested in transit, we are estimating that it would generate $13 in economic activity and travel time saving throughout the Chicago region. So as a summary, coming to some of the key takeaways, increase in transit boarding from added investments with benefits in the mobility side with lower congestion. That would save about a 9% travel time, leading to savings in energy, greenhouse gases, and emissions, leading to an overall return on investments of about 13x. And we've discussed this again in May. Right, the average national estimated is about 6x, but because of Chicago unique density and the expected return on investments is much higher. And I would like to thank my colleague from Argonne, as well as all the support from CTA in that study. And that study was funded by the US Department of Energy Vehicle Technologies Office. Thank you very much.
So just to, how we think about utilizing this and the partnership that we've had with Argonne has really been invaluable, and how we discuss an investment in transit doesn't mean picking transit over cars. Oftentimes when we talk about funding, there's often this discussion of, if you invest in transit, you have to invest an equal amount of cars, or if you invest in transit, it diminishes car travel, or you need to invest equal in roads and bridges. And I think the point that we're trying to make, and I think what really demonstrates here, is an investment in transit raises all mobility modes. You see that you get a decreased speed or decreased travel times with cars. It invests in car travelers as well as invests in transit. And so I think that's a really important conversation as we go down and start having conversations with legislatures. Is an investment in transit doesn't mean you're hurting car travel, doesn't mean you're taking away from vehicle travel. It does mean that you're actually investing in the overall mobility of our community and ensure that there's equitable transit access as well as good mobility throughout all of our communities. So I think that's one really important point, that because the way Argonne does their analysis, they're able to look at the overall system. They don't just say, this is transit. They're able to look at how the system would function as a whole if you invest in transit. And the other piece of this analysis that Amrit really hit on and talked through is, this isn't just about improving frequency. This is also a policy discussion as well. How do you think about land use? How do you think about prioritization of bus on the street? And when you make those investments, you see an even further return on investment. So when we're talking with legislatures and we're talking about investing in transit, it is both a funding conversation as much as it is a policy conversation. Tell us where you want to spend your money. I'm going to tell you your priorities, right? That's the typical, but also tell me what policies you're putting forward. We're not just asking for additional funding for transit. We're asking for a policy discussion about the prioritization of transit in all areas of our community, from how we decide street infrastructure to how we decide land use and investing in electrification and all the different energy and sustainability components. So, that's happy to take any questions. Amrit and I can, dive into any details. There's obviously a lot of analysis behind this that we're happy to discuss.
Thank you. I've learned a great deal this morning about Argonne's work and what they've done. I expressed some of that earlier in the committee meeting. But as you know, there's currently a series of state Senate hearings about transit in the region. And the points covered here would be helpful, again, for our legislature to get a better understanding of how to sustain transit in the region and funding. But there's also some proposed changes in governance. Wanted to know if your study and your work took any of that into consideration, as we have these other sister agencies and the proposed governance structure that's being proposed versus what we have now.
Yeah, I'm going to speak for Amrit a little bit, just because they are they're a federally funded organization with Department of Energy, and they work with everyone. So they didn't necessarily look at governance. And I think the point, and probably President Carter can make a stronger point, because he's been doing this for decades. The governance structure is not part of the conversation, because governance didn't drive a reduction in ridership, right? It was lack of funding. It was the recessionary cuts that Jarrett Walker talked about. That's really what has impacted transit performance in the region. And so looking at governance wouldn't have changed. We didn't look at it because it's not part of the outcomes that we're talking about. We're talking about how the state prioritizes and how others prioritize transit, and how that comes from the funding and policy perspective. So I don't know, sir, if you want to add more to that.
You covered it very well, and it's been part of the bigger point that I've been making in the conversation I've had with the elected officials. We didn't end up here because of a governance problem. We ended up here because of a funding problem, and that history, what that funding problem has done, particularly the CTA, almost uniquely the CTA, is part of why it needs to be changed. The other point that I think that's being made here, I think it's an important one, particularly in a post-pandemic environment, is broadening the definition of what successful transit means. Historically, that has been based on one metric and one metric alone, ridership. The truth of the matter is, in a post-pandemic environment where the investments that need to be made in public transportation are not necessarily aligned with the type of ridership boost that you may see, particularly in low-income minority communities, particularly in late-night and hour service, so your ridership historically is not going to be at the same level as it would be during weekday. Particularly in an environment where there are fewer people who are commuting to and from work, which would make up the vast majority of our ridership numbers on a typical weekday. We need to start talking about the value of public transportation in a much broader sense. That's part of what this report is also getting to, which is there are benefits to public transportation that go beyond just fewer numbers of who ride the system every day. And it's part of one of the reasons why projects like the Red Line extension is so important, that they are going to create value in that community that goes way beyond just pure ridership. The third point that I think is really important in this study, and that I think is important to remember, and Director McQuayle, I will point to you because you and I have had some very interesting conversations about public transportation in other countries like Barcelona, Spain, and so on and so forth. It's a combination of not just a funding conversation, but the policy conversation. Putting in place good land use planning, putting in place good zoning strategies, putting in place good development strategies, all have to work together to maximize the benefit of public transportation. It is not just the dollars that go into public transit alone that drive that. When you look at what I call world-class transit systems, and you look at what they are doing, they are combining all of that as part of an overall strategy that is driving not only the ridership of public transportation, but the other community investments that support it. If we can get to that kind of understanding with our elected officials, then I think you have the environment in which CTA, Metra, PACE, all of us will flourish. That is not an environment that we've ever had in Illinois. Certainly is the environment that we've had in Chicago. And you've seen the results of that from the conversation that we had earlier with Mr. Walker. We can reverse those trends as you all have indicated in your reaction to what we shared with you today. But it does require a coordinated effort with our elected officials to make that happen. It is not something that CTA would be totally by itself.
Any other questions?
Just a couple of things. One, I wanted to acknowledge and thank Molly and the team for bringing these joyful scenarios to the table, because again, the conversation has been dominated by doom and gloom, and that does not get people excited or legislators excited. I would, for future messaging, I would encourage, as I mentioned before, to use specific examples of what that impact would be that are more micro. Like I saw you mention the Ashland BRT, what that would look like, what that would cost, and what that would do would be super helpful to get people excited. So I wanted to say that to you all, and of course, offer myself for whatever you need in terms of helping connect dots and bring storytellers to the table. And then I wanted to also acknowledge our chairman and president for acknowledging the horrible crime and shooting that took place Labor Day, and I wanted to remember the victims, Simeon Bihesi, Adrian Collins, Margaret Miller, Sean Jones, and their loved ones, and at this difficult time. And I wanted to thank the many first responders and the work of CTA staff to help arrest the shooter. And I also want to acknowledge the immediate measures that the security team and the CTA leadership have provided at the Forest Park station. And I wanted to say, and I'm completely behind your call for support and that we cannot do this alone. I want to say that we have in place, CTA has in place a strategic plan, or is developing one, and Molly has been great at connecting dots there. There's also a budget process in motion for the agency. And there's a request to Springfield to provide funding next year. And also it's been 6 months since the RTA convened the safety summit that they put together. Hundreds of advocates, experts, police came to the table and produced a report with recommendations. So I'm saying all this because I have a question to President Carter and CTA leadership. And the question is, what would it take to build on all these streams of work and develop a comprehensive multi-layer security plan relying in more and deeper partnerships with government, with the private sector, and with the nonprofit community. And I feel strongly that we have an opportunity to build a security plan and strategy that helps not only with the perception and the reality of security, but also with many other goals at the same time, such as customer experience and increased ridership. And many of these amazing opportunities that we have seen here today don't make sense if people are scared to take the train or to wait for the train or to wait for the bus. So I just wanted to say this, pose this question, and also making myself, of course, available to support that security plan process, build the table that we need to build, recruit the partners that we need to bring to the table, and help find the resources to compensate them.
Thank you. We can make sure that we sit down with you and walk through the multiple layers of our security plan that we are pursuing.
There are multifaceted aspects of it. I covered a small portion of it. That it is multi-layered, it's pointed out.
The point that I was making earlier wasn't necessarily tied to our ongoing efforts to both improve and develop additional areas within our own security plan, but it was just a recognition of the fact that there are other elements that impact our security and safety that are outside of our control. And with the harsh reality of how we go about doing that, and I think to your point, how we're making the public aware of what we're doing, I think it's an exercise that we will continue to do and continue to improve and refine.
I don't want to put this in the context of there are limitations, be it financial or others, that we face in terms of what we have the ability to do or not to do. But I agree completely with you that it requires a collaborative, lack of a better word, whole government approach to address these issues. And we are, as you may be aware, very active in much bigger issues that are more citywide and countywide around some of these issues, in addition to what we're doing here at CTA. I'm happy to
make sure we give some more detail around all of that. That's forward. As our budget process moves forward as well, we'll obviously be focused on this as an initiative, along with a number of other initiatives that we have to address in the upcoming fiscal year, and certainly look forward to the dialogue during that process on how we continue to move the needle forward as best as we can around the safety and security of our customers and of our employees.
Appreciate that. Thanks.
Question?
Yes. Maybe along those lines, there might be an opportunity to do a safety task force, or, we have other ways of convening partners. I know the mayor is also doing a lot on safety, so I'd love to see how there continues to be a stronger dialogue between all of our team members looking at safety, the mayor, their initiatives that are happening there, so that we can leverage those resources and be able to be as impactful as possible on the safety items.
I agree, and that's part of what I was mentioning earlier. We are on a number of task force that are broader around the safety issues in the city, around the challenges, around the root causes of those issues at the community level. And we continue to be engaged in that. So I don't want to leave the impression CTA is not a part of some broader under conversations that are taking. We're very much a part of it. And I know that the mayor is obviously very committed to addressing these root cause issues that we know are creating a lot of the challenges that we're seeing it play out in CTA, as well as on every street corner in many parts of our cities as well. So I think that's the point that I think we're making here, is that this isn't just occurring on CTA. The media is filled with stories of crime and other acts of violence that are occurring throughout the city that obviously are of concern, and that I know the mayor is very deeply about. He has brought many elements of government, departments and agencies together to work on this, and we are a part of that effort. And I'll make sure that we give the board a better understanding of where else we're dabbling in this issue, separate from the work that we do here directly at CTA.
Great, thank you. Another point, we also have seen through other reports that the data that is shown is really important, and it's great to show it by race and ethnicity. So there are ways to also understand the impact in the Latino community who have also benefited a lot from these services, particularly bus. I'd love to hear a little bit more on that. I didn't see it quite on this one. I saw it in the earlier one, so I was understanding those demographics and the impact of this work into that joyful scenario. Thanks. Last but not least, I want to second the comment around storytelling. I felt like there's a great way of being able to share this joyful scenario, this beneficial scenario. And so just breaking it down in a level of like, maybe one person is going to have these many more jobs available, which can increase in this many more like income levels. So thinking about at the individual level, how can we tell that story a little easier, I think would be really impactful. That's all. Thank you.
Director Aziz, I should point out that we are actually working on exactly that. I've had those conversations with Molly and the rest of my team that we continue our dialogue down in Springfield as well as throughout the region. That we start turning this, this work and the work of Mr. Walker and the work we've done internally into real stories of what a typical, member of the community can experience in a future vision of public transportation that would support their needs to do everything from going to work, to school, to childcare, to the grocery store on a regular basis. So the elements of what you're talking about are also being woven into a bigger, message that I'm giving directly around what I believe the future of public transportation can look like, and why we believe that we need the funding levels that we need to do that. And to that point, the conversation is about getting a level of funding that doesn't just fill the gap that we currently have and we're facing in 2026, but is providing a level of funding to allow us to do the improvements that we're talking about that ultimately can support a level of service, a frequency of service, a span of service that can really meet the needs of the communities that we serve at a level that they should expect, and ultimately driving some of the other benefits that we see discussed here as a direct result of that. None of this is being done in a vacuum from everything else. It's actually all coming together right now, which is why you're getting presented on it. It is all going to feed in to the bigger conversation of what we're doing in Springfield and ultimately what we want to see accomplished as part of an overall strategy to address the funding needs that we have going forward.
Any further comments?
No. Director Jakes?
You've been in a series of meetings with the Senate. When they talk, most of it is about transit reform. Is anything we're talking about today falling in their conversation of transit reform?
The hearings that I've been at so far have really been almost more like what I would call town halls. It's an opportunity for the committee to hear from the communities that they're going into about what they want or what they feel is missing in public transit. They also have been an opportunity for other local elected officials to weigh in on the governance conversation and whether or not they believe that the future that they're looking for in terms of public transportation can be addressed through governance reform. I believe there needs to be more discussion like the ones that we're having here. I think there is more of an opportunity to further educate the legislature in Springfield about the broader opportunity that exists with proper funding. And I'm looking forward to those kind of conversations occurring as the hearings continue into this fall and as the House side of this conversation starts to really get started, which is really just getting underway in the last couple of weeks. The Senate side is who we've been primarily engaging with over the last several months.
So there's really been no conversation downstate about equity. The reform is making sure that there are no ghost buses.
There's a lot more discussion about that than there is about equity. I don't want to say there isn't any discussion about equity because there is. And if from no one else than from the service board members themselves who go to all these hearings and speak to those issues as part of the broader topic of discussion. But, you know, I think there are opportunities for a much deeper dive into what that means and what that would look like. That we have yet to have with the Senate Transportation Committee, but I'm optimistic and hopeful that we will have it as we move forward.
President Carter, any other comments? I do want to thank you and your team for the work that went into apprehending the persons who committed this heinous crime.
Excuse me, Chairman Barclay, could you please speak up?
Sure. I want to compliment you and the entire CTA team. I continue to be impressed with your professionalism and tenacity, working towards its goal. But it was through our system and our employee that we were able to assist the police in apprehending this person who did this crime on our system. So while we continue to grieve loss at what's happened, moving forward, we want to work together with various agencies in the city to make sure that our system is safe. And I want to just compliment our employees. They do a hard job. It's a very difficult job working in the public. And sometimes they don't get the compliments that they deserve for the hard work that they do. And because in thinking about that person getting off the blue line and getting on the pink line, but for an alerted employee, we could have been looking at a second tragedy on that line as well. So I do want to extend and maybe we can acknowledge that employee at some time in the future. Absolutely. I want to also talk about the DNC as well. The city demonstrated on the world stage that we're able to, work with a shared goal of making sure that there's safety. I've heard comments that they saw police on the platform, that they saw police on the train. And so we're deeply concerned about the safety of our citizens and our riders. And so we'd like to see more police on the trains and on the platforms, not just for the DNC, but for everyday citizens who have to get back and forth to work, to church, and to synagogue, and to wherever else they need to go. We want to basically make sure that they're safe and that when they leave home, they can reasonably count on returning home in a safe manner. One of the things that has puzzled me, and I struggle with this, we talked about the inequity of services throughout the communities, particularly in Black and brown communities. But we have overnight routes that basically, there are not a lot of people on those routes. And so sometimes the criminals come out and they do things in the middle of the night, like we're sleeping and other people are trying to get home from that last shift to make it home. Sometimes there's a lot of crime that occurs on our system. And I'd like to get a better understanding of how we balance continuing with overnight service on certain lines if we're going to not be able to tackle some of the criminal element that's going on at the same time. I mean, in the daytime, there are probably more people. Criminals are probably less likely to target people. But those who are sleeping, those who are trying to get home from that last shift to make it home, those who may just be on the train because they have nowhere else to go. How do we balance continuing with a 24-hour service on lines where there's a lot of criminal activity?
I think, as you know, CTA is one of only 2 transit systems in the country that provides rail service 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the other being New York. It has been a source of pride in this agency that we continue to do that because of particularly the needs of those individuals who don't have other options, some of which I heard Mr. Walker talk about in his report just a few minutes ago. The challenge around that conversation is exactly what reality of the need for public transportation to move those individuals who don't have options, while also dealing with some of the other challenges that may occur on our system at that time of night. I certainly, understand what those trade-offs could be, and I'm certainly more than prepared to have that conversation with the board around those trade-offs. I think it is a decision that we have historically felt comfortable justifying because of the need to provide that access and that mobility on those two lines. Certainly an incident like what we have happened at Forest Park gives people pause over what we can do to protect our customers and our employees at those hours of the night. And is there more that we should be doing or can do to address that? I don't know the answer to that question in a very definitive term. I can tell you that we'll continue to explore what options are available in coordination with our partners in the police and law enforcement industry to do that. And yes, if the board is interested in understanding maybe a little bit more clearly what's happening in those hours of the night, what our ridership looks like, what the crime activity is during that time, what the need is, we can certainly present that information to the board to have a better understanding of the decision behind why we continue to operate that service and why we view it as an important part of the service that we provide.
But I would like to see in perhaps 60 or 90 days come back and report to us about the impact because I want to learn more about these crimes are taking place during these shifts that are probably there's a little bit less fewer number of people who are traveling during this time period. And like I said, I struggle with this because I understand the need for people to get home from that last shift. But I am concerned about if we don't have the security that's needed to safeguard those passengers. That is a concern of mine. I've always said that, we're in the transportation business. And it's rare that we see our trains break down, rare we see our buses break down on the side of the road. These social issues that are a little bit outside of the transportation realm sometimes don't make us look very good at all. And so I have some concerns about it.
Understood, and I'm happy to get our staff together and give you some analysis on that issue.
Finally, I want to say that I did attend the Transit Jamboree on Saturday. What a wonderful event. Other board members next year, if you could attend, it would be great, but it shows the CTA in the most favorable, where employees compete against each other, but also take pride in what they do. And it's a wonderful family event. And it's something that I would encourage all of us to take advantage of. But it really shows a different side of CTA that we don't often see. There are a lot of people who work very hard, don't get it the kind of recognition that they deserve, but they do their jobs very well and they take pride in doing that. So thank you for the invitation. And I want to put out one last point. I'm going to ask my board members and challenge them to next year put up $100 each if President Carter will get in the dunk tank. We can raise a little extra money for that. Thank you very much.
Well, maybe if the chairman joins me on that.
We'll talk about that.
Out of that conversation.
Our next order of business is executive session.
Chairman, we will go into closed session today under the Illinois Open Meetings Act, subsection 2C1, 2, 8, 11, and 21.
I will now entertain a motion to recess into executive session for reasons stated by council.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Rakeo, seconded by Director Eady, that the board recess into executive session for the reasons stated by council. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Rakeo?
Yes.
Director Ortiz? Yes. Chairman Barclay? So moved. Second. It's been moved by Director Recajo, seconded by Director Eady, that the board return to open session. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Recajo? Present. Director Ortiz? Yeah. Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Eady?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay, the motion passes.
Now address board agenda item 6A.
Item 6A, the board.
I'm sorry, Kent, are we recording?
Are we recording? Yeah, it's Vida, I believe so.
It's being trans.
Vida, are we good? Yes.
In item 6A, Chairman, the board reviewed the closed session meeting minutes for August 14th, 2024.
May I please have a motion to approve the closed session minutes for August 14th, 2024?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Director Recajo, seconded by Director Eady, that the closed session minutes from August 14th, 2024 be approved. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Recajo?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Eady?
Yes.
The motion passes.
I'll move on to item 6B, Chairman. With respect to board agenda item 6B, the board reviewed the recommendation by council to approve a settlement in the matter of Michael Page versus CTA and Danielle Robinson, pending in the Circuit Court of Cook County, Illinois, case number 2021 L001357 in the amount of $3,625,000.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve a settlement in the matter of Michael Page versus CTA and Danielle Robinson, pending in the Circuit Court of Cook County, case number 2021 L1357 in the amount of $3,625,000.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Director Recajo, seconded by Director Eady, that the board approve the settlement in the matter of Michael Page versus CTA and Danielle Robinson. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Recajo?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Eady?
Yes.
Motion passes.
We'll now address agenda item 6C. Kent?
In connection with board agenda item 6C, consideration of this matter will be deferred to the Chicago Transit Board's October meeting.
Thank you, Kent.
In connection with board agenda item 6D, Chairman, board reviewed an ordinance authorizing execution of a collective bargaining agreement containing the terms of a tentative agreement with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 134, for the controllers.
Thank you. May I have a motion to adopt the ordinance authorizing the execution of a collective bargaining agreement containing the terms of a tentative agreement with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 134, controllers?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Director Recajo, seconded by Director Eady, that the board approve the ordinance authorizing the execution of the collective bargaining agreement with the Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 134 controllers. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Recajo?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Eady?
Yes.
The motion passes.
In connection with board agenda item 6E, Chairman, the board reviewed an ordinance authorizing execution of a collective bargaining agreement containing the terms of a tentative agreement with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 134, pending the rail janitors and coordinators.
Thank you, Kent. May I have a motion to adopt the ordinance authorizing the execution of a collective bargaining agreement containing the terms of a tentative agreement with the National Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 134, rail janitors?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Director Recajo, seconded by Director Eady, that the board adopt the ordinance authorizing the execution of a collective bargaining agreement with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 134, rail janitor coordinators. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Recajo?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay? Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Eady?
Yes.
The motion passes.
In connection with Board Agenda Item 6F, the board reviewed an ordinance authorizing execution of a collective bargaining agreement containing the terms of a tentative agreement with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 134, representing the roadmasters.
Thank you, Kent. May I have a motion to adopt the ordinance authorizing the execution of a collective bargaining agreement containing the terms of a tentative agreement with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 134, roadmaster?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Rakeo, seconded by Director Eady, that the board adopt the ordinance authorizing the execution of the collective bargaining agreement with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 134 Roadmasters. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Rakeo?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Eady?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Finally, in connection with Board Agenda Item 6G, the board reviewed an ordinance authorizing execution of a collective bargaining agreement containing the terms of a tentative agreement with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 134, representing the yardmasters.
Thank you, Kent. May I have a motion to adopt the ordinance authorizing the execution of a collective bargaining agreement containing the terms of a tentative agreement with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 134, yardmasters?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Rakeo, seconded by Director Eady, that the board adopt the ordinance authorizing the execution of a collective bargaining agreement with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 134 Yardmasters. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Rakeo?
Yes.
Director Ortiz?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Eady?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Now address board agenda item 7, board matters. Georgette, do we have any board matters today?
Chairman Barclay, we do not have any board matters today. I would bring to your attention that we did pass over the Citizens Advisory Board report, and just make note for the record that neither the chairman nor the vice chair of the Citizens Advisory Board is able to appear today, or was able to appear today. And the request and the recommendation that they've asked for is that they be allowed to present in October at the board meeting. And that's it, Chairman Barclay.
Thank you. Our next order of business is a report from the Committee on Strategic Planning and Service Delivery. Director Ortiz.
Yes, we had a presentation at the meeting, but no motions were done.
Our next order of business is a report from the Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget. Director Jakes.
That would be me, wouldn't it? Hold on a second. You have to have a copy of that readily available. Yeah.
I do. Director Eady.
Something to me. Permission to go to the next item and then circle back to me. Yeah, that's great.
I would like to request them to let me go back to the department if that's okay.
That's good. So next time.
Thank you. I'll do a more detailed briefing on that specific report. So the committee met earlier this morning and approved the December 13, 2023 committee minutes. The committee entertained one report, a presentation on an initiative entitled Bus Station Project Framing Report by Monty Poppy. Our CTA Chief Innovation and Planning Officer was Jared Walker and Cara Baden. That concludes my report, Chairman Barclay.
Thank you, Director Ortiz. turn to the FAB report.
Okay, the committee met earlier this morning and approved the August 14th, 2024 committee minutes and reviewed the finance report. Committee reviewed one ordinance, review of an ordinance authorizing a temporary right of entry agreement with the Union Pacific Railroad Company for the Red Line Extension Project. Committee also reviewed 9 contracts. Committee placed the one ordinance and 9 of the contracts on the omnibus. Committee approved and recommended for board approval 1 ordinance and 9 contracts. This concludes the report of the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee. And thank you. Thank you.
I will now entertain a motion to approve the omnibus.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Director Recajo, seconded by Director Eady, that the omnibus be approved. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Recajo?
Yes.
Director Ortiz? Yes. Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Eady?
Yes.
The motion passes.
Our next order of business is the construction report from Bill Mooney, Chief Infrastructure Officer, and Juan Pablo Prieto, our Director of Diversity Program.
Good afternoon. I am Bill Mooney, your Chief Infrastructure Officer, and I am joined by
Juan Pablo Prieto, Director of Diversity Programs.
We have your monthly construction update. We'll move to our first project, which is our Canal, Berry, and Damon Substation Upgrade Project. The project continues forward on schedule and on budget. At Damon, we have traction power equipment showing up. So I've shown you a lot of building work over the last few months. We now are enclosed enough that they were able to bring in the new lineups here. So you can see here the transformer and rectifier combos being installed here. They will be wired up, and over the next 3 or 4 months, fully integrated and start their commissioning process, which is pretty extensive, and especially in a facility here. Here at Berry, they've now got power coming into the building. So this is them installing the new duct bank to the facility. That also, we opened up the street on Kimball there. We're able to bring in water and sewer at the same time. So this is actually a pretty key milestone to be able to make those final connections. They are working on weather tightening the building as they come into the fall. And the equipment up there shows up shortly too. Here you can see kind of the subsurface work at Berry. Just for your recollection, this is a multi-story building. It goes up a story, but it also goes down 2 stories. So here's some of the work in the subgrade basements, prepping it for those future equipment installs. Moving on to our next project, which doesn't have a cover slide for whatever reason. This is the Western Brown Line Station Improvement Project. This is a new project that we've introduced this month. It is a $30 million investment in the Western Station on the Brown Line. When we did the Brown Line Capacity Expansion Project, the station saw a very minimalistic amount of investment at the time. This is heavily supported by City of Chicago TIF funding. It's getting a lot of more cosmetic and wear and tear improvements, curtain wall repairs, window upgrades, but really a lot of painting and lighting and improvements, as well as the bus turnaround gets an ADA upgrade. So all the bus access will be fully accessible at that point in a new canopy. Here you can see some of the prep work for painting. You can see the kind of aged look of the structure there. Here's some additional prep work right over Western Avenue. It's pretty amazing to see the impact of the paint here already. Here you can see some of that prime coat and then that tan coat going on. This is over Lincoln Avenue, which is the other side of the station. We are also doing a bunch of roof repairs on the station house. So they had to go up on the roof, clear out the area, make a bunch of kind of conditional repairs to the roof, as well as tidy up some areas up underneath there. Here's some renderings of what that future improvement will look like. So this is a fast moving project. A significant portion of the project gets done this year. There currently is an impact with a back ride for the outbound direction there right now, which is for concrete repairs. We're replacing kind of the concrete edges of the platform where that ADA tactile strip is. We see a lot of debris repair there. So it's being completely removed and reformed, as well as they're painting all that surface structure. In the upcoming weeks, we'll actually be flipping to the other side. So you'll see some of the finished work coming for that. Here's another rendering. This is on the other side of the facility where you can see the upgraded kind of facade, the new curtain wall and glass, as well as that new translucent canopy with the bus facility and that full ADA access. Moving on to Harlem Bus Bridge, the project moves forward very swiftly. This is pretty exciting. It's going very well. You can see the fully demolished out deck of the former bus bridge. This is the steel stringers getting ready to pick. They get removed ultimately. We do a bunch of prep work, and then in the upcoming month, we'll start setting the new bridge members. Here is actually the abutment walls on kind of either side of there where they actually have to completely rebuild and reconnect those abutment walls, resurface them for the increased load of the new steel. Here you can see some of that excavation work around that. This is, again, preparatory for the future installation of the steel coming in. With our Racine station and ADA traction power upgrades, we've got walls at Racine. So we have, over the last month, continued to grow out of the ground up there. So you can see the exterior walls here for this new station house. Here's the interior where you're starting to see some of those rooms being formed for our electrical panels and other such things. As well as the elevator enclosure. And we've also got a roof being installed. So here is the roof members for that station itself. And this is one of the really fine architectural features of the new station. I showed you some initial steel around this a couple months ago, but this is a big waterfall stairwell. So it comes down with this glass sweeping enclosure from the main station house to the platform level. And you're seeing that curved steel erection for that future stairwell. At the Morgan substation, they continue to add roof and build up kind of around there. They also have formed and poured out the main floor for the concrete. You can see kind of all the holes that are where all the cables come up from track level for that facility. And here's kind of some additional steel work going on to prep for that second floor, which is being installed as we speak. Moving forward with our Refresh and Renewed program. So we did a lot of work around the DNC in preparation to welcome all our visitors. But we do continue forward with our basic program with 17 of the 29 stations fully complete, 9 of the 14 bus turnarounds. We are making a full press to finish up as we move into the fall here. Our highlight stations, here's a before after of O'Hare. So we did a ton of work out at O'Hare as a gateway station for us as a community. We took the opportunity. One of the unique architectural features of O'Hare when it was first opened in 1984 was there was a color wall. It's actually the wall behind the glass is painted in stripes of colors, and there's lights that reflect upon it, and that allows that color to come through the glass block there. Over the years, the lighting had been more and more challenged, and it had gotten dirty, so we actually fully cleaned. It is a floor to ceiling. It's 30 feet tall wall. We fully cleaned it from the bottom up, gave it a fresh coat of paint. You can see the difference from the left to right, how that color pops out. We also added the flag pennants along the way, kind of allows you kind of that welcome opening feeling as you walk in. And we completed a new epoxy coating on all the floors there. Here at the mezzanine level, we refreshed the lighting, upgrading everything to LEDs. You get a very clean, crisp lighting footprint now. Our station really shines in that corridor for those who've ever used it. We are kind of nestled into the underground there at the airport, and this really makes it pop out as you walk up to it. Here's one of our recent bus turnarounds. This is at Navy Pier. You can see kind of the upgrades there, the cleanup around the facility. Here's some other striping examples there. And this is Chicago, just down the street from us on the blue line. You can see kind of, this was again a station that now was done, opened, completed the rehab on it in 2019. It's coming around in 2024 to that 5-year cycle of touch points. So you're seeing that kind of cleanup, scraping, painting. Luckily, with a newer invested station, it doesn't require nearly as much effort, just more than a refresh than the renew. Moving on to our red purple modernization, we continue forward on budget, on schedule. A lot of activity. We are again kind of in a rinse and repeat cycle here. So this is the red purple bypass corridor. You can see them building what we call skeletonized tracks. So just the rails and the plate assemblies that they're prepping for a concrete pour. This is the diamond that will connect ultimately tracks 2 and 3 out here. It's part of what we call Clark Junction here. It facilitates a lot of movement of trains around other things. One of the major other impacts we've been seeing in the bypass area is we've actually been installing the underground detention system. One of the benefits the neighborhood actually receives as part of this project is we collect water that our structure ends up collecting in rain events. We hold it underground until the rain event has ended, and then it dissipates into the sewer system, which creates an overall benefit from the watershed of the neighborhood as a whole. It is a sustainability feature. It is something that is required in the code in most cases, and with the level of size of canopy we create with the track deck, it is a pretty sizable system. So you'll see a series of these micro drainage structures where we connect into the main sewer line. Moving up north to the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr area, the stations continue to grow. So here you can see the precast panels for platforms. I've shown you kind of the steel and other aspects of these stations. So here at Bryn Mawr, which is the furthest along of all the stations, they actually are getting a platform installed as we speak. Here is the main stairwell for that station. You can see the concrete floors being poured there. Moving further down the street to Berwyn. This is actually an escalator. So again, with the access around the segmental box structure, we got to bring in those major escalator spans early in the project. They are wrapped in layers and layers of plastic and other tarps to protect them throughout the rest of construction, but they wouldn't be able to be installed otherwise. You can also see that elevator in the background of that photo. Here at Argyle, they're starting to form up. Last month, we showed you kind of the foundation of the station there. Here you can start to see, similar to Bryn Mawr, those stairs getting prepped for construction, as well as the exterior walls of the station there. And we continue with site restoration work. So one of the big aspects of the project on the backside of it is we actually resurface the streets and alleys in the footprint. Part of the goal is that we actually lower the streets under our structure. So not only do we make a higher structure, we actually bring the streets down a little bit to increase the movement of vehicles underneath it and potential impacts. But we also replace all the sidewalks in the areas that we're doing work. So here you can see they're moving ahead with a lot of that work. So the community is also seeing benefits of the project even before we're done with those new improvements. And what would be a monthly photo without our most powerful worker, the Windy City Gantry here is setting up our segmental box structure. This is just north of Argyle as it continues to work south. So this should be finishing up in the next month or so, and we'll say goodbye to Windy City. We continue our ongoing outreach, weekly check-ins with the 44th Ward, the 46th Ward, the 48th Ward. In July, we hosted, as part of the FTA's Transit Asset Management Roundtable tours of the project. So this was one of the first projects that actually included a TAM requirement where the contractor puts together a bunch of data about asset management that goes into our work order systems, gets fed into our work order piece. They asked to highlight it, and so we were able to oblige a multi-phase tour of it. We participated in local events such as Argyle Night Market, the Edgewater Farmers Market, and then we actually had an ongoing, I've talked about it for all time, we have an ongoing effort that's called our Open for Business campaign, where we work with the local chambers and local businesses. We did a checkpoint with them, talking about the next round of the campaign coming up, any needs they may have for us to highlight, and other businesses we should be looking to sign up for. That I'll turn it over to Juan Pablo.
Thanks, Bill. Good afternoon, directors. I'll be providing you an update on RPM and our first outreach activities. As of the end of July, 119 unique DVE firms have been awarded over $279 million between the design and construction packages on RPM Phase 1. 54 of those firms are new to CTA. DVEs have been paid more than $175 million on the design build contract, which puts Walsh Floor's attainment at 17.32%. On the workforce side, as of the end of July, 2,333 unique individuals have worked over 1.8 million labor hours and earned over $111 million. Walsh Floor is tracking to meet their workforce goals. Next slide. In July and August, we hosted tables at several events, including the Chicago Latina Magazine DEI event, the Illinois DCEO Latina Economic Summit, Cisco's annual Union Construction Trades Fair, and the African American Contractors Association Contractors Day. We also hosted tables at CHA's Construction Trades and Apprenticeship Expo and the Chicago Federal Reserve Bank's Smart Business Week. We presented at the Conference of Minority Transportation Officials at their annual conference and also at the DCEO Latina Economic Summit. We hosted an orientation session for our Building Small Businesses program, participated in the RLE Project Office Build Out Meet the Contractors event to ensure that they have high participation of DVEs and SBEs on that build out, and attended the Illinois Hispanic Chamber Membership Breakfast. Finally, we hosted 2 sessions of our monthly Driving Small Businesses the Distance webinar on accounting and taxes, and another on certification. We hosted 2 certification drives, one in the RLE project footprint and the other here at headquarters in partnership with HACIA. And we hosted a Meet the Contractors event with FH Passion for the Western Brown Line project. We'll continue to bring you our activities and our work on how we advocate, certify, and invest in our DVEs, SBs, and career seekers. It concludes our presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Director Ricao?
Yeah, thanks for the report. And a lot of those stations, those new stations, are already attracting development nearby. When we opened the Damon station, there was already an ETOD next door. Same thing at Western. And several times, President Carter, you've been making calls for more capacity for CTA to be able to develop land and be a driver of TOD. And so I wonder what would it look like to have a good TOD or ETOD plan to present as part of the funding requests to Springfield, knowing that the legislation that has been introduced includes a pretty significant portion to set up an office of ETOD at that regional level. And I feel that we could lead that effort ourselves in that we have already examples. There's already a call for that support. CTA is part of the ETOD working group with the city. But we don't have, like other transit authorities do, a TOD office that is staffed full-time to be the driver and the manager of those efforts. So I just wanted to check in with you all. How are you thinking about building such capacity? And to me, it would make sense to be proactive and be the ones coming to the table with our own idea of this is what we could do with this capacity that we need from the point of view of legislation and with additional funding, rather than, again, waiting for others to shape our agenda. So any thoughts on that question?
Well, as you indicated, the TOD activity currently happens within our planning department, in close coordination with infrastructure as part of that effort. I think to some degree, you're almost having a chicken and the egg conversation, because what I want is more authority to do more TOD, which would then, I think, justify creating an office that would be focused on that particular activity, while obviously taking advantage of where we think there are TOD opportunities, particularly on projects like Red Line Extension and RPM, where we're working closely with the city, who is pursuing appropriate TOD strategies as part of that effort. I know that we have funded both RPM and RLE some significant amount of work around those areas. I think the real opportunity for future TOD growth is not necessarily around our expansion projects, but really around our existing infrastructure and much of the vacant land that the chairman talks to me about all the time, that I feel if we could have more of a say in what to do and how to do it, we might be able to move those opportunities forward. But more importantly, we would view it as more of a priority to make something happen. We have more of an incentive to want to pursue that. And I think that historically has been the challenge, really getting the attention that I think those types of activities exist going forward. The question whether I create an office, as a budgetary matter, I see your point about it sort of puts a marker down on our intention to do that. And I'm certainly willing to have that conversation with my team about whether that's something we want to put into our budget for something going forward. Right now, you're right. It gets incorporated in other departmental responsibilities as part of the work they do on various projects.
Thank you. I would welcome that next step, knowing that it's not only myself. I heard several of my fellow board members concerned about that vacant land in their communities adjacent to many times next to a train station, which in another city would be unthinkable to have that prime real estate vacant, and to make it part of a package, because I'm aware of the budgetary constraints, but sometimes you have to put everything together, the land, the capacity, the financial products necessary to make a strong case. And again, offer myself for any support on that front. I think we have a great opportunity now that for the first time that I've been in Chicago, I have never seen legislation being introduced that there is a clear call for the creation of such TOD infrastructure. And again, CTA has led in the region. I know Metro is interested too. So just saying, let's do whatever we can to be ahead of the curve and think big on this issue, knowing that we have a ton of opportunity to become that TOD leader.
Well, I would welcome your engagement in doing that, and certainly we can have further conversations about what that would look like here at CTA in conjunction with obviously the additional legal authority that we want to have that would allow us to take full advantage of that type of an office and those types of programs going forward, which I think has been a key component of what I've been discussing down in Springfield about the things that they need to address as part of any new funding strategy going forward for the agency.
Great, thanks.
I know my discussions with, some of the legislators have indicated, that they would look favorably upon a bill that would expand the authority, legislative authority to allow for, TOD entry, Chicago Transit Authority. So I think we just need to get our government affairs people on that, sponsor, get a piece of legislation in the pipeline so we can move forward. I know RTA has also said that they would favor that as well. And I know the city of Chicago has also spoken with the commissioner of planning, who has also said that they would lend their support as well.
Yeah, like I said, I think it has been discussed. It is being discussed as part of the broader funding solution for CTA. As you know, many transit systems use TOD as another funding stream to support their transit operations, and that's certainly what we discussed. CTA could do as well if we had the authority to pursue in a much more aggressive way those types of opportunities. So I have not heard any opposition either in any conversations I've had around that approach. And certainly it's something that is on our radar as part of what we want to see in terms of legislation going forward.
I want to second both comments, and thank you for all that background around ETOP and the opportunities that we do have in hand. I will also note a tiny little detail, but I think there's an opportunity here as well. On the western brown line stop that we showed on there, there were a lot of white walls on there. I'm not sure if they're gonna get painted, but there are probably some great fiscally responsible ways of maybe creating that a more dynamic kind of space. Obviously, that might help with any graffiti that might happen in the space. So if we use it and highlight it with whatever ways or means that we can put maybe art there or engage community partners to do something there, I think that would be great.
There's been a lot of conversation around the space around the station. There's a courtyard directly adjacent. Chicago Department of Transportation owns, and they're looking at a program set for studying things. I've asked about is we use the wall of the station as a projector, right? To allow that. It's tan. It's a light tan brick. But could now the courtyard host movie nights and things like that and be able to use that station? We also have a partnership with Chicago Film Archives. We have a project down in Cicero. We support a project at 43rd where they actually knit together home videos from the neighborhood for many, many years, and we allow them to display it and stuff. So we talked a little bit about activating space like that too with them. On the other side, in the internal space of the station, we actually have a historical relic of the Berlin Wall within the station, which is kind of the magnet piece. And the project does include some restoration of that piece, as well as some being able to highlight it with some better lighting and actually contain it to protect it from elements a little differently. So it does have some aspects around that. And then there's kind of a third leg of it, which is there's an under L activation. So there's an area that has a pathway from kind of the station between the eastern exit from the station house to Lincoln Avenue. That's a regular walkway. I showed one of the early photos where they were covering the cables, and there's an activation space there that we're also looking to work with. We've been kind of talking with the community and CDOT and others about how you make that space most beneficial, not only for a walkway, but there's some things we can do with other points that we could support in that. So we'll take a good look at the walls too. It's been a pretty strongly dedicated, active community process here with the Alder. And we have another follow-up meeting probably in late September, early October with the final pieces. This is a unique job. This is the first progressive design build job we've ever done, which means that it kind of we're designing and getting pricing on aspects of it as we are building. So there's work going on that we're still getting the next leg of work going and stuff. It's a new model that we're trying our foray in. So, but it certainly allows for some flexibility to think about things as it evolves. So
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, Juan, to raise this question. When I saw here about the 119 unique DBE firms, and then I saw about the new ones, is there some sort of a preferred or pre-approved listing, and then new ones are added? And then what is that criteria?
No, the unique thing with RPM, because of the size and length of it, we were able to do a lot of outreach and make sure that any DVE that was interested in participating on the project knew how to bid to the prime. There were multiple packages that were put out. So if a DVE bid on their first iteration of let's say the concrete package and didn't win, they knew there was 2 other concrete packages behind there that they could ask for a debrief from the prime and then try again later. Those strategies have led to that number of 54 new to CTA. And that was one of the goals that we had set out when we started the project, was to say, we're going to spread the message about the project as far and wide as we can so that people know that this project is happening, that there's opportunities on it. We also did, like we're doing now for RLE, multiple certification drives, because there were businesses that were MBE, WBE certified, but not DVE certified. So we brought them in, talked them through the program, helped them out with their application to make sure that they were certified, so that by the time the prime was releasing packages, they had their certification, they can compete for those packages. So we continue to do that now, even with all the work that we have going on, and looking forward to the extension, the red line extension, continuing to expand the base of DVEs, because we know that the more we have in the pool, the better the competition will be and the more opportunities there will be for DVE participation.
Right, and I also saw about your outreach events, and we had chatted about being able to possibly convene for information to be brought. I'm a part of a number of faith-based, community-based coalitions. I see that you had a series of meetings. What timeline does it require to get a team out or what have you?
So yeah, most of these meetings that I presented on, we attended, others hosted, and we went there. But when you're ready for us to come out and talk about our different programs,
yes,
we're happy to come out at your convenience.
Yeah, because we have something coming up. And so that's why I want to know what was usually the window of time that you need in terms of notification.
You let us know when to be there and we'll be there.
All right, thank you.
Another comment? Thank you. Appreciate it. Our final order of business is new business. Georgette, is there any new business?
Chairman Barclay, there is no new business.
Thank you. There's no further business to come before the board. May I have a motion to adjourn the Chicago Transit Board meeting of September 11th, 2024?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Director Requejo, seconded by Director Eady, that the meeting be adjourned. We'll take a roll call vote. Director Requejo?
Yes.
Director Ortiz? Yes. Chairman Barclay?
Yes.
Director Jakes?
Yes.
Director Eady?
Yes.
Chairman Barclay, the motion passes.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.